And good morning. It's time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by Renegade River in Spring Lake. And now your host, Mike Hewitt.
Good morning. Thank you, Brian Thomas, Jim Riley. Thank you both for being here. Folks, listen, we've got Tom Lambert on the line with us, who is the president of Michigan Open Carry. Tom, welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Good morning. Really quick, I'm the vice president, at least for the next week or so.
Okay. Are you going uphill or down in another week?
There's a vote here in about 2 weeks, and I'm running for president.
Oh, very nice. Okay. Well, listen, I understand there's a lot of legislation taking place around us in Lansing as it relates to both concealed carry and open carry. Am I right?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of legislation going on.
Listen, for listeners, let me get the elephant in the room out of the way right off the bat. For some listeners that are not familiar with firearms, or they're maybe neutral in the position, or don't get why a person would want to open carry, if we could just lay a little bit of foundation. Why would a person want to open carry in the great state of Michigan?
Sure, I'll try and sum down a 2-hour conversation into 2 minutes here. Basically, we say there are the 3 P's of open carry, or 3 reasons why you would want to do it: the personal, practical, and political. Personal is things like, it just works for you. You prefer it. It's more comfortable for you. Maybe you have a body type that makes it easier. Practical is kind of the same thing. It facilitates a larger firearm. It facilitates larger magazine capacity, things like that, faster access. Then there's political. You want to come effectively out of the closet and be proud that you're a gun owner, and show people that you're a gun owner, and show friends and neighbors that, hey, good guys have guns too. And effectively what the political thing does is it desensitizes the public to the sight of firearms and destigmatizes gun owners. Hollywood and the media has done a lot of work to make gun owners look like bad people, and the best way to counter that is directly and in person.
Part of it, just so everyone's aware, I listeners certainly know, I own Renegade River, which is one of the sponsors of this show. Renegade River is a gun shop. I tell you all that so everyone knows what side of the fence I'm on this particular debate. Having said that, in the gun shop, obviously we have these kind of conversations a lot, and there's a certain segment of the gun enthusiasts that are anti-open carry, and the rationale is that we're winning the overall political battle, so why poke the uber left in the eye by running around openly carrying and poke them in the eye with it?
Well, I would say they're confusing cause and effect. We are winning the political battle, especially in Michigan, because of open carry. Now, I know there's a few people that do things incorrectly. That's not what we're for. Michigan Open Carry tries to promote the good way of doing it, effectively being a good ambassador. We don't want people standing on a street corner screaming at people. Just open carry in your daily lives and go about it. It's not about seeking attention. It's just about protecting yourself and doing whatever you do. Just carry in your everyday life, and that's what we look for.
It's a fascinating thing. When I first off, I announced this show coming on yesterday evening on the show's Facebook page and on the show's Twitter page, and so I wanted to attach a picture to it of an example of somebody open carrying. The problem that I had in doing that was that most of the pictures that I could find were of people running around with armor light rifles. I think some people call them assault rifles. But I don't know that that's the same thing as what you're proposing, is it?
Michigan Open Carry, we focus on an openly carried holstered handgun.
Okay.
It's not that we're against anything else. It's just that's what we focus on because that's where the laws are, and that's what people tend to carry every single day. And so that's what we use to push forward with, especially when it comes to long guns. I know Texas has been in the news. It's just a huge amount lately, and the reason is that they don't have handgun open carry. All they have is long gun open carry. So what they've been doing is they've been carrying their long guns openly to show that, hey, we can do this. Why can't we carry our handguns openly? Now, open carry did pass in Texas, but it doesn't go into effect until January 1st.
Now, I think that you just articulated regarding Texas kind of goes to the image that a lot of folks have, especially folks not in the gun enthusiast circle, if you will, have of Texas with the shotgun or the rifle in the rear window of a pickup truck, where media is trying to caricaturize negatively gun ownership and et cetera. Is that kind of a true statement?
Oh, that's what the media does. The
Yeah.
media does that constantly, every day, all day long, is try to paint every single gun owner in the entire country in the bad light of one person that does something stupid.
I think sometimes we hurt ourselves, though. I wrestle with this, to be candid with you. With, for instance, some of the political rallies that take place in Lansing, when you'll see several hundred people, or actually in the thousands of people, a lot of them running around with armor light rifles and so forth. I don't know that imagery helps us politically, both with the legislators and the citizen electorate.
Oh, the rallies in Lansing, they have a great turnout. Legislators come and talk. Heck, we had a Democrat legislator openly carry his AR to the rally this year in Lansing, a Democrat legislator. So it's all about context, and when it comes to rallies in Lansing, I mean, that's a good time to carry. Normally, every other day, that's where we start focusing on just carry what you carry every day.
Listen. Now that we've went through the imagery a little bit, so folks, listeners can maybe get a feel for, first off, the fact that you're reasonable, because I think a lot of them have been convinced that our side of the argument is just not reasonable, and of course that's not the case. Tell me though, there's I think it's a Senate bill, and I'm always wrong on this, but I think it's Senate Bill 422. There's a fairly aggressive Senate bill floating around. Am I wrong on that?
I think it's 442, but
okay.
It could be 422. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's 442. Basically, it's introduced by Senator Green. A lot of people in the gun community in Michigan know Senator Green's name. His name has been on some of the biggest pro-gun legislation over the past decade or decade and a half. He's had some hugely very pro-gun bills. Unfortunately, lately, he's taken somewhat of an anti-open carry stance. He wants to trade open carry there's a list of zones where if you have a CPL, you can carry openly in these zones, but you cannot carry concealed with your CPL. He wants to trade open carry for concealed carry in these zones. We don't mind open carry. In fact, we're one of the biggest groups pushing to allow concealed carry in these zones, but we just don't want to give up open carry to get there. We don't think that gun owners should be pushed back into the closet again. It doesn't make any sense, and it hurts the long-term ability for us to push.
Tell me this: some of the disputed territory, for lack of better words, as I understand it at least, is public schools and also college universities. Am I right?
Yep, those are a couple of areas. Okay. I know my group in particular is actually suing a school on the other side of the state in Clio because they refuse to comply with state law.
State law. What is current state law that they're not complying with?
Effectively, there's a number of different laws that work together. One is in the penal code that prohibits firearms in schools. It's been around for a long time, and it actually matches federal law. Prohibits firearms in schools. Well, just as federal law has, it has an exemption for anyone licensed by the state. Well, CPL holders are licensed by the state to carry that firearm. Michigan law specifically says you have to be licensed to carry a concealed weapon, which the CPL does. So if you have a CPL, then that statute, that prohibition, doesn't apply to you. Michigan also has what we call preemption. Almost every single state in the nation has this, where the state says that only the state legislature can make gun law. No local municipality, no local unit of government can. What that does is it makes it so we only have one blanket set of rules to follow instead of literally 6,000 all across the state. It makes it nice and easy for gun owners to do what they do, and that's be law-abiding.
Listen, some of the folks listening right now are raising their eyebrows. I can hear them, and I have this conversation a lot at Renegade River, by the way. Why would a person want to open or conceal carry at a local public K through 12 school environment?
Well, it's a good question, but it comes down to the thing about being a victim is you don't get to decide when you are a victim. You don't get to decide when, you don't get to decide the location. And we've found out through a lot of examples that, you know what, schools, people do fall victim in schools too. It doesn't happen as much as some of the media like to sensationalize it out to be, but it does happen. So if I'm a law-abiding, licensed person that's peaceful, out in the public. I can go to the mall. I can go anywhere else. If I'm fine there, why is it when I cross some imaginary line, I can't be trusted, or I'm suddenly somebody with nefarious intent? It doesn't work that way. I'm lawful everywhere.
I think, first off, I agree with that position, Tom, but I think there are a lot of people that take one of two or probably both approaches. The first is that if you're open carrying in a public school arena, you are causing fear and consternation with the youth. And then the second is that the folks that are really anti-firearm, and by the way, it is like a religion for them.
Oh, it is.
Because you can't reason. There's not a dialogue you can have that will cause even a truce. It's a religion. So they know that politically they can stand at school or churches or wherever and say these areas there's no sense, there's no reason. But when we look at the statistics, I hate to be cliche, but you don't find a lot of mass shootings at gun shops. You find them in schools and in arenas where there is no such thing as legal gun carry.
Oh, yeah. What was it? Crime Prevention Research Center said like 95, 96% of mass shootings have been in gun-free... all but 2 of the mass shootings have been in gun-free zones over the past 50 years. And you raise a point about scaring the children. I've heard it a lot. Well, if I'm going to scare the children, then wouldn't I scare them out in public? Wouldn't I scare them when I go to a mall? Wouldn't I scare them when I go to a store? Wouldn't I scare them when I go to a movie theater? Wouldn't I scare them in all these other places? The truth is, it really doesn't happen. We have video. We have tons of examples. And the media doesn't like to tell you this, but based on the feedback I've gotten from people, I would guess that somebody is openly carrying, lawfully, a firearm in a Michigan school at least once a day.
Let me just jump in here and ask a question, because I heard you on the radio earlier in the week in a very, very great conversation with someone who was against the carry within the schools, and he said something that I think I might take issue with, and maybe you can clarify. The concern that folks would have, certainly parents would have, is that you have these gun enthusiasts with large caliber or small caliber guns openly on their hips, wandering their elementary schools. Now, if I understand correctly, doesn't every single school within, certainly West Michigan, you can't even walk the halls. You must check in. You can't. You're not allowed, as a parent, as an adult, with or without guns, to walk the halls of the public schools in our county. Is that the case in the state?
That is generally the case. And when I've talked to many principals, superintendents, school board members over the past couple of years, because they reach out to us and say, hey, help us try and address this issue. And one of the first things I tell them is you cannot relax just because you don't see a firearm. It's because generally it's not the firearms you see that are the problem. Let's go back over all these cases. If somebody has a visible firearm, it's usually very easy to tell if they mean you harm right away. Otherwise, 99% of the cases where we've had school shootings, somebody illegally concealed their firearm into the school, passed all their security measures, and then started doing what they wanted to do. So just because you don't see a firearm doesn't inherently mean that that person doesn't have a firearm.
But as to the question of can adults walk with or without a firearm throughout their schools, throughout our schools, uninhibited, is that true? Or are there little gates? Is there any kind of slow-down protection?
It depends on the school. It depends on the specific district. It depends on what's going on. But generally, most schools do not allow that. And the reason I kind of went off on that tangent is, because again, you can't necessarily, just because you don't see a firearm doesn't mean you can inherently trust them. So it is, in my opinion, a good idea for schools to limit access to everyone.
I think that's very true. But I thought that is the way it's always been. So
you would be surprised of how much it isn't. It's still growing. More and more schools are still adopting it. In a lot of ways, this open carry stuff is forcing them to go to that in that direction of limiting access and keeping parents more confined to the office. Whether or not that's good or bad, it depends on who you talk to.
You know what would surprise most of the listeners, I think, is the sheer number by percentage of high school and junior high school especially, but teachers in general, that are customers of mine at Renegade River.
Yeah, the school unions, have their opinion, but unions and groups don't necessarily speak 100% for their membership. There are tons and tons of people. The radio show you mentioned just the other day, I referenced how many teachers, how many school employees come up to me and say, I would pay for my own training and carry my own firearm and my own ammo if they just allowed me to. This wouldn't cost the school or the school district a cent. I'd do it all myself.
Part of that is a little bit like the debate over airline pilots carrying, in as much as we ask these teachers to defend these classes from, frankly, people that are almost lion's share. It's not 100%, but it's in the high 90% range of people that are reacting to the steering mechanism provided by psychotropic drugs. And if I were a teacher sitting in a room with 30 or 35 students and did not have any means to defend them and me, that would be a very disconcerting thing, because there are a lot of people out there that have their systems full of these psychotropic drugs. And to me, I don't want to take us down a different path, but when I look at the pictures of these people that have done these mass killings, knowing that they were just recently, every single one of them, with the exception of one, puts it in the high 90s.
Let me just jump in here for one other thing, which also references the conversation that you had earlier in the week on the radio, and that is that if there is an issue with a gun in a school, as we found with Columbine and with others, the policy in many, if not all, police departments is not to go rushing in, because, of course, if somebody is armed, that's going to end up, in many cases, with a dead police officer. What the police will do is they will arrive very quickly, but they will stay outside of the school until they've assessed the situation. During that assessment is when all the mayhem happens. So the concept that the police, who I have tremendous respect for, but the concept that the police are going to in any way intercede in time to stop the situation.
Yeah, they're there to write reports.
Well,
not,
their
not
policy,
stop it.
and their policy is, and it makes sense, and at least at some level, is not to go inside.
Nope.
So in other words, if you have that bad person, if that person has a gun and he's running around in the school shooting at people, the police will stay outside.
Yeah, I think the cops have to wait now. But gentlemen, listen.
Let me
unfortunately,
jump in if I may. My understanding is that Columbine actually changed that, because that was one of the problems in Columbine, that the police waited.
Right.
And since then, they've changed to more of a mentality of rush in and try and stop.
Right. Listen, guys, we're out of time. How can folks find you? Is there a place they can reach out to Michigan Open Carry?
Sure. Michigan Open Carry we're on Facebook. We have a page. We have a huge group with people asking tons of questions all the time. We're easy to find on Facebook. You can also find us online at miopencarry.org. That's miopencarry.org.
Tom Lambert, thanks for coming on the show, and I look forward to having you back again. Good luck in your election.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Folks, we'll be right back.
Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. You're listening to Jim Riley. I'm Mike Hewitt, and on the line with us is Joel White, who is the president of the Council for Affordable Health Care down in Washington, D.C. Joel White, welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
I'm trying to find affordable health care. I haven't found it in several years. and it's getting worse, I might add.
It is.
Listen, I'm reading a little bit of a blurb that tells me that you folks are following some new legislation that's going to potentially ramp up fees for small businesses up into the $36,000 plus range.
Yeah, we're hoping to prevent that, but maybe I provide a little bit of background for you. I think you hit the nail on the head when we talk about healthcare costs and affordability. We've got businesses and individuals who are facing literally a tsunami of costs, and there's some people running around talking about the lowest rates of cost growth in history of the country, and you've got this real disconnect between what's happening, what the statistics show, and what people in everyday homes and businesses are trying to struggle through. And so what we're seeing next year is an average premium increase of about 12% for individuals, probably going to be a little more for small businesses, and so they're struggling just to make ends meet, to pay the premiums and pay for some deductibles and cost sharing. That's really significant. The problem is, on top of that, we've got the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, the tax collecting agency of the U.S. government, came out with a rule that basically said if you're an employer, any size employer, and you offer a tax-preferred dollars through what's known as a health reimbursement arrangement. It's an account that helps people pay for health care costs, like eyeglasses or well baby care or your annual physical or things like that. And you don't combine it with a major medical plan, you're going to be subject to a fine. The IRS is saying that that's not having major medical coverage if you're a business and you're still trying to provide assistance to your employees. That's not good enough. So we're going to fine you, and the fine is $100 per day per employee. So just put that in perspective. It's $36,500 per employee, up to $500,000 total. And these are for employers who are trying to help their workers by giving them tax-preferred dollars.
So what they're saying is that if you're a small employer and you cannot toe the line, we'll destroy you.
Basically, I mean, I think
as a
what
small,
they're saying...
Listen, as a small business owner, that's how I interpret that. Because that would destroy me.
Yeah, I'm a small business owner, too, and I got to tell you, we got 9 employees, and these penalties went into effect on July 1st, okay?
Right.
So right now, my business owes a little less than $10,000 because it's every employee every day, $100 a day. So I'm racking up $900 every day if I'm providing a health reimbursement arrangement.
So the answer, the better path then is to say we're not providing insurance. Get on Obamacare and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, I think that's what the goal is.
That's what they're directing small employers to do.
I think that's right. That's what the goal is, and basically, it's very paternalistic. It's basically saying if you don't have the Cadillac coverage, the full Monty, if you just are trying to do right by your employees and give them a little bit of assistance, that's not good enough. We're going to fine you until you come into compliance, or you just stop offering coverage or assistance.
Now, to me, Joel, please tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me like this is a backdoor path to achieving single-payer insurance. Because we know that the majority of employers in America are 50 and less, and if we push them down this path, then that's the result they'll end up with without ever having to push for it.
Yeah, I think that what we need to do is do everything that we can to keep employers in the game. Right? We've been struggling with healthcare costs going up since Obamacare got enacted. We've been struggling with these very high, outrageous, some would say, cost-sharing requirements on the deductibles and things like that. And now the IRS comes along and says, even if you offer a little bit of assistance, on average about $1,300 a year is what the small businesses provide.
Yeah, in my own,
that's not good enough.
It isn't. And in my own family, we've went from a couple $100 a month to several $100 a month in premium, now with no deductible in the past, now with a $3,000 deductible. And if you would have stopped me 5 years ago and said, "What does this policy look like?" I'd have said, "That looks like a junk policy. Don't buy it." And now that's what we have. And
now that's kind of the standard operating procedure. It's, I think what we're getting from the Affordable Care Act is a lot higher premiums, a lot higher cost sharing, a lot more benefits, yes, but not something that everyone may need. Like an elderly woman doesn't necessarily need maternity coverage, for example.
Well, Joel, Jim Riley here. Just one thing that you touched on earlier, and I'd like to maybe clarify a little bit, because I get quite angry when I hear the media reports of the reality, and it is true, I suppose, at least it's been reported this way, that the health care costs growth to businesses has been slowed. And while that may or may not be true, the reasons for any savings are because of these very high deductible, high copay policies that can easily bankrupt a family. And
the actual reason, Jim, is that fewer employers are carrying health insurance.
Well, and that may be the case too. But my point is that on one hand, the average folks who have lives out there, who are working, who just catch a little snippet of the news, they hear repeated endlessly that healthcare costs are down, the growth is slowing. The reasons are Obamacare, and in fact, that may very well be. But the reasons for the reduction in these increases has to do with the fact that the policies that are being sold are nothing comparable to the policies that people had in the past.
I think you make some really important points. Let's break this down a little bit, okay? What's happening is the rate of growth, the rate of increase, is at an historic low. That is true. But it's off a much bigger base. So even these small rates of increase are leading to tens of thousands of millions of billions of dollars in increased costs, such that we're going to go to about 19%, about $1 in every $5 we spend in our economy is going to be on healthcare services. What that means for a household is that in the next 10 years, the typical family is going to spend more than 50% of their income on healthcare costs, all in, premiums and out-of-pocket costs, okay? That is not sustainable. And so that's why I say you've got people crowing about lowest rate of cost growth in history, and you've got the family and the business sitting there going, this is my number one concern. I can't make ends meet with these kinds of cost increases. And that's why the IRS action is just so baffling to us, that they would just shut down another avenue for these small businesses to do right by their employees.
I think it goes to the political agenda, which is to cause a single-payer insurance. Part of the problem, though, belongs to the citizens, in my opinion. And what I mean to say is that somehow we've decided along the path since 1965 that it isn't our responsibility to shop for best service, best price. And that fundamental difference is what allowed the Uber left, not just left, but the Marxists, frankly, I gotta hate that word, I don't mean to be sensational, but by definition, it has allowed them to push their way into this arena. And frankly, it's threatening to flip our economy upside down.
The other thing that's happening as a result of these health cost increases is that, yes, lowest rate of growth in history, but it's accelerating. The latest data that we have is that costs are up, and they're going to be up big time. Last month, utilization, price, intensity of services, about a 5 to 6% increase in costs. That's nowhere near the 1% or so that people were crowing about. So it's accelerating. And the other thing is that if you think about your income, you didn't get a 5 or 6% raise last year. Maybe you got a 1%. On average, people got pretty close to zero nationwide. Health costs are growing faster than people's incomes and the economy. And that means people are less able to afford their coverage. So, again, for the IRS to kind of shut down these avenues, is just baffling. It's ridiculous and outrageous.
Or Joel, is there some collusion between the government and insurance companies? Can I use that word, collusion?
I don't know if I'd say collusion. I think as a result of the Affordable Care Act, there's been a lot more incentives between, particularly on the provider side, to get bigger and consolidate, and that drives up costs. And now what we're seeing on the insurance side is there's also some merger and acquisition activity going on. The thing on the insurance side is interesting because the bigger the payers get, the more ability they have to negotiate discounts. So it's kind of almost a counterbalance to the provider side, the hospital and physician side. But we'll see how all that plays out. Certainly, as the Affordable Care Act is being implemented, we're seeing folks who have a lot of access to the administration and those who don't have a lot of access. And I'll just leave it at that.
On that note, the Council for Affordable Health Care, your organization, that is a lobbying organization?
We're a nonprofit, multi-stakeholder advocacy group located here in Washington, D.C. We've been around since 2001, and our whole reason for existence is to fight for policies that lower health care costs.
And this is a really silly question, I know, because they tell me it's settled law, it's the law of the land. Is there any chance of ever getting rid of this outrageous drama that they called Obamacare?
Yeah, I think I think the incentives are wrong in Obamacare, and I think that we're starting to see what's happening as a result, and that's these very high cost increases. We've got people are not signing up for this program unless they're subsidized, which means if you ain't subsidized, you don't want to buy this product. And so as a result, we have a sicker risk pool. We have fewer enrollment. So I think, some people who talk about, like Chairman Paul Ryan and the Ways and Means Committee, talk about how, this is we're starting to see some evidence of death spiral and collapsing. So I think that as we look at what's happening in the marketplace and how this program is not necessarily succeeding, that you'll continue to see members of Congress, senators, and perhaps a new administration much more willing to make changes or even repeal portions of this law. But I think that post-King v. Burwell, the Supreme Court decision, that took a lot of air out of the repeal fight here in Washington.
Well, there's been just yesterday all over the web some statistics out there that are saying that nearly 30% of veterans who were waiting for health care through the United States government-provided Veterans Administration actually died prior to them getting the health care that they needed. This, of course, the VA isn't the only government health care out there, but it seems to me that folks like yourselves and us who are trying to fight this Obamacare are missing out on so many people support government health care because, number one, it's free, and number two, of course, it's government and it'll be just fine. But the reality is that when government has been in charge of health care, be it Medicaid or Medicare, which, of course, both of those are going broke, but the quality of care has been awful.
Awful. And, there was one study conducted that being on Medicaid may actually be worse for your health than having no insurance. In the state of Washington. But in the VA, remember, these are men and women who fought and got hurt in defending our country. We've got to do better for these guys. We can't have 30% die on a waiting list.
And this is what government provides us. Yeah, that's the issue. It seems to me more people ought to be made aware of when it's free, when it's provided by the government. This is what you get. 30% of the people who were waiting for health care died. Before they got it.
It's an incredibly, it's like they said, let's take the absolute worst system we can possibly think of and provide that for those folks that have defended us. But listen, then when they see that it doesn't work, they go further and say, let's give this to all citizens. But when you look at the history of health costs, 1964 it was 5% of the average income, and now it's almost 40% of the average income, and the only difference is government help. And we can't afford their help anymore. I don't know why folks can't see that.
Yeah, and I want to re-stress the fact that in the next 10 years, we're looking at the typical family owing 50% of their income just on their health care coverage and services. We can't afford to not do something. We need to encourage Congress to act. We're fighting this IRS regulation, and there's bills in the House and the Senate that have been introduced. They're bipartisan bills to partially address this outrage that the IRS is doing.
Joel, what would be the proper replacement for Obamacare in your view?
Yeah, I think you got to put consumers in charge. I think the patients need to be in the driver's seat here. For too long, we've had a healthcare system that was set up for payers and healthcare providers like hospitals and doctors, and to a large extent ignored the consumer. I think that's starting to change, at least in the private sector with employer coverage. But we're seeing Obamacare kind of get in the way. We're seeing the consumer being quote unquote protected from every single potential injury here, and therefore has no incentives to respond to prices or to respond to any other kind of market signal. So I think you got to get the consumer back in the driver's seat. I think exchanges, healthcare marketplaces are a good idea to select coverage, but you ought to open up the choices. You can't have a one-size-fits-some like the Affordable Care Act says. You either get a gold plan or a silver plan or a bronze plan. Let the people pick what they want and make it a truly competitive marketplace.
I think a lot of folks, Joel, are not aware of the fact that there are less people now with access to affordable health care than there were in 1964 by percentage. And to me, and folks, if you don't believe me, you can find that out. The information's there. I think that is a very fearsome statement for the direction of our country as it pertains to health care.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. The thing I liken it to is the housing crisis that we went through several years ago, where most people couldn't afford the home they were living in without a subsidy from the FHA. I think we're headed in healthcare to the point where most of the people won't buy a product unless they get a subsidy from the federal government, and that's not where we want to be. We want a market-based system that really gives choices to people so that they can take care of their needs.
You're absolutely right, but the other problem with that, Joel, is that when we ask government to administrate something for us, we have to recognize that their average administration cost is about 87%. So you stand back and say, wait a minute, do I really want to give them $1 so that they can give it back to me and call it free health care? It's my money to start with. They take a lion's share of it as it goes through the meat machine. That to me is absolutely insanity.
Yeah, healthcare is really, really personal. It's basically between yourself and your doctor, or it should be.
Let me
to have this all flow up to the IRS and HHS and then come back down to you in some way through a government-prescribed program doesn't seem to be the most efficient way to do it.
One of the
Getting
reasons
the IRS involved is probably a punitive system that we don't need.
Well, in speaking with you and perhaps listening to this show, we understand the downside of these programs and certainly the wildness that's to come. But if you listen to NPR, if you listen to the liberal media, we hear nothing of this sort. It is many more people are insured. Health care costs are going down. And to me, this is the biggest single issue, is that those folks who get their information from conservative radio, perhaps even Fox, they get an entirely different story as to what the success or lack thereof of the Obamacare plan. And again, one of the problems, and time and again I've asked folks, we've got this Obamacare now. How do you think it's working? If they are folks who are listening to NPR, they are getting nonstop confirmation of what their thoughts might have been, is that more people insured, costs are going down. It is an absolute unmitigated success.
It's absolutely wrong. I mean, the costs are going up, not down. And what we're seeing is that unless you provide a subsidy, people aren't signing up for the program.
Well, this
is
the
real
news
tragedy here.
They're getting.
Yeah, one of the tragedies that I think here is that I have a bunch of oncologists friends. Shortly after the coverage kicked in for Obamacare, he had a bunch of patients in his Philadelphia area office who had tumors. He had diagnosed them with cancer. And they had very high deductible plans. They just signed up for a plan on the exchange and under Obamacare. And I think one had a $6,000 deductible, one had a $10,000 deductible, and they walked away from treatment. Yeah. What he said to them was, your tumor will continue to grow. It will grow through your skin, and within 9 months you will die. And they said, I can't leave a legacy of debt to my children.
Wow.
Yeah, listen, I have to tell you.
It's those kinds of stories that we need to take to heart and say, there needs to be changes here.
Listen,
right? And we need to make this stuff more affordable.
Joel, I have to tell you 2 points on that. First, I had an oncologist, by coincidence, in my shop last week, and I said, listen, politics aside, what's truly the best next step for medical coverage and medical care in America? He said, you need to get everybody get them out from between the doctor and the patient. It's none of nobody's business. It's not their role. Get them out. Costs will go down. More people will have access to coverage. But to your point of the oncologists you were talking about, I was born with a heart defect. And so now when I'm sitting with my $3,000 deductible and my local cardiologist here in Muskegon, Michigan is telling me what I need to be done, I'm thinking, jeepers, do I really want to spend $3,000 on that? And I'm in there asking him, I know you're a cardiologist and you're probably one of the most famed guy in all of our region, but do I really need it? Is this just defensive medicine, or no? You need it, and you got to swallow deep, because it's like someone telling me you need to go out and buy a $3,000 paperweight instead of it. It's an outrage, is what it is. People are passing on coverage that they need. Listen, Joel White, we're out of time. Tell folks how they can get a hold of your organization and help you.
Yeah, if you go to cahc.net, you'll find some information on the bill we've been talking about to stop the IRS from fining small businesses for providing help to their employees. Contact your member of Congress. Go to House.gov or Senate.gov. Tell them to co-sponsor the Bustani or Grassley bill in the House and the Senate. You'll have more information if you go to cahc.net. We're hoping to start a nationwide movement to say too much is enough. We can't have the IRS fining people for doing right for their employees.
Amen. Joel White, thank you very, very much for joining us. I hope to have you back again as we go through this Obamacare process.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Folks, we'll be right back with the Enigma Report.
Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station.
And now it's time for the Enigma Report with your host, Mike Hewitt.
I'm telling you, he done good on that, didn't he?
He did.
You've been practicing. I bet he's been sitting in the mirror practicing Enigma.
He's been enigmating.
Enigma.
Come on, Mike, don't give away my secrets.
There you go. Listen, folks, I'm really getting to slowly like this section. I think the first time was a train wreck. The second time was okay, and we're really getting there, but this is really turning into my favorite segment of this show. Enigma is people, places, things that are hard to understand sometimes. Is that a fair description of what the meaning of enigma is, Jim Riley?
I would say that's reasonable. Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. Like we were talking about healthcare in the last segment. One of the things on my list, so I'm not going to make a big to-do out of it because we had so much healthcare, but to me it's an enigma about why most citizens now have decided that their own healthcare and shopping for best services, best prices, their own personal healthcare is the responsibility of somebody else. I'm not railing on Obamacare. I don't want to talk about that no more, but my health care is my business, and making it affordable is my responsibility. I don't understand. To me, the other side of this argument is an enigma. It's something I just don't understand.
I think I can help you on that a little bit.
Please do.
As you have done yourself. The problem is that sorting through, trying to make the decision of what would be the most appropriate health care plan for an individual or a business, but let's look at the individual side, is incredibly complicated.
No, let me narrow it down. I don't want to cut you off, but
sure. I
don't want to turn the segment into a healthcare segment, but some of this is really, really easy, okay? Let's say you had the sniffles, or you got a cold, and you're saying, listen, I better go to the doctor. People go to the doctor, and they don't ask how much it is. They don't ask what they're going to get for what they don't know how much it is. They don't ask any of those questions. And when you do, by the way, if you're one of the few policy wonk, gearhead, nut, whatever you want to call them, that actually have the audacity to ask the person you're talking through you're talking to whoever's making the appointment, scheduling the event, how much is this going to cost and what services will be provided? They look at you like you're an absolute nut for what I consider to be an absolute common sense, bona fide question. Most of them, by the way, haven't a clue what the answer is.
Well, let me help you here on this, just for one thing, because I went through this when I was purchasing my own Obamacare. You don't ask the physician. The physician doesn't know. You're correct. The person that you can ask is the office manager or the person at the desk. They are very often very helpful.
I've done that many times. You know what their answer is? I really don't know. They say I don't know the answer to that because all of this is coded. We have to get with the billing the billing agent or the billing clerk or whatever that person's title is. We'll email you or call you back, and guess what happens? They don't.
Well, then you need a new physician because I've gotten very clear and concise responses. As a matter of fact, one thing I have found, especially for those of us who do have these high deductibles, is to go in and talk with whomever it is. It may not be the person at the front desk, but I would definitely ask and say, look, I have a very high deductible. I would like to pay cash or pay a check right at the time of service. Are there any discounts? Again, you don't want to get into a discussion with your physician about cost, and for the reasons you stated, they don't have the information, and that's not what they do. But they do have somebody hired that you can sit down with and talk with.
Nobody does it. When I say nobody, I'm painting with a big brush. I bet you less than 2% of their patient body ask those questions, because I do, and every single time I do, I get the deer in the headlight look like, why would you even care?
I'm going to suggest you need a new physician, because I've done it on a variety of occasions.
I've done it at a number of different levels.
The more of us,
cardiologist down.
If it is 2%, then we need to change that number, because you have to have your own input.
We're not going to change it. I've had people on this debate tell me, Mike, what the heck do I care? That's my insurance responsibility. That's Medicaid's responsibility. That's somebody else's responsibility.
Now with the big deductible.
Listen, before we run out of time, I'm getting a big 3-minute thing here, so this is going to be a really short enigma, and you should see the thing I had planned for today. But the last interview was so good we had to run him over a little bit, at least in my view. One of the enigmas to me is that the Democratic Party, and I don't want to make this about party politics, but that's how much time I've got. The Democratic Party identifies themselves as the Jefferson-Jackson Party. I end that with a question mark. Then I read, to compel a man to furnish funds for the propagation of ideas he disbelieves or abhors is sinful and tyrannical. That was Thomas Jefferson. I say, really? He's the guy that the Democratic Party embraces? To me, that's an enigma.
Great point.
Now, listen, they do embrace Jackson also. Now, Jackson was the Trail of Tears guy. He was an absolute tyrant. That makes more sense to me. I'm sorry, folks, but that's how I see it. The Jefferson-Jackson, what brought this up is I saw someone, a Democratic friend, had announced that they were going to a Jefferson-Jackson dinner, and I busted out laughing. Both of those two things are just so filled with irony. Causes me to say, what is the actual real definition of the word liberal? Because when I look at it, it's liberty from government, it's liberty from tyranny, it's me making my personal choices. That's what the actual word means, not socialism. Nothing related to anywhere near it. That's an enigma that they mix those two words up in my view. The last thing, I think what I've got 1 minute left. If we in my mind, if we keep erasing the troubles of our history, we'll continue to have troubles in our future. And in this time, I'm directing that comment towards the Iranian deal that was just made. Ugh. And I can't help but reflect back at Ambassador Thomas Jefferson, along with Adams, that were in Europe, and they were trying to reach some kind of compromise with the Somalis. By the way, after they paid them bribe money to quit attacking our merchant ships, and that was when we had our very first war against terror. That's what it was. That's what it's referred to. The 1801 through 1805 War on Terror. Look it up. And here we are again trying to bribe and make deals with our enemies. But we were able to unite Israel and Saudi Arabia, but against us, because we're with our enemies now. Insanity has gripped our political culture. What do you think, Jim Riley? Am I wrong?
I agree with you 100%. It's a very, very sad situation. It feels like 1930s Europe.
It's all upside down. When I look at it, we are literally railing against our allies and embracing those people who are burning our flag and threatening to kill our leadership. That's insanity to me. That's an enigma. I don't get it. I just flatly don't get it. But listen, folks, find us on Facebook at The Mike Hewitt Show, or Talk Mike Hewitt on Twitter. We'll talk to you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake.